YouTube. It's been a while that I haven't had a live stream, and let me come on on camera. Like, what am I doing? So yeah, it's been a while that I haven't had a live stream. Today we're doing Ursula K. Guin once more. Given that it's been a while, it also means that I'm not entirely sure if the setup is perfect. I feel like I feel like I'm seeing a lot of lag from my side of things. If things bother anyone who's live watching, please let me know. And if no one says anything, then I'm not going to worry about anything. So hello YouTube, welcome to Vanessa Júpiter Reads. I am Vanessa Júpiter and viewers are experiencing buffering. Open widget. I don't know what to do with that. Like, if this bothers anyone too much, let me know. The buffering that I'm seeing that you may be experiencing. And if someone complains, I'll do my best to fix it. But yes, this is Vanessa Júpiter Reads, which is exactly what it sounds like, where I come on YouTube live and I read texts that I consider to be good, relevant, or both. Today we are going to Ursula K. Guin, and the plan for today is very simple. I'm going to talk a little bit about who I am, about what Vanessa Júpiter Reads is, about why I chose this text for today, as opposed to any other day, and yeah, why, like, basically give a little bit of background as to how we got here today. And once that's out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and read the short story titled "The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas." It is one of my favorites. This is part of the background. I don't read a whole lot of short stories, and "The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas" is one of the very few short stories from my life that I actually go back to again and again and read multiple times. As primarily a novel reader, it is rare for this to happen to me. So there you go. If at any point anyone who's watching live wants to say anything, please do. I will be looking at the comments occasionally. I'm still seeing a note saying that the stream quality is or may be buffering a lot, and I don't know what to do about that. So, but I also honestly don't know if anyone is going to come to watch live, which is fine. If there's anyone here, please feel free to voice your presence in the chat. And if you are watching this in the future, I am going to put little chapter marks in the description, so you can jump around, and if you're only interested in hearing me read the text, you can easily do that. If you're only interested in the afterward discussion, you can easily jump to after I finish reading the text. And if you were for some reason only interested in me introducing myself and talking about what this is, you can also do that. So let's start by introducing myself. Hi, I'm Vanessa Júpiter. This is Vanessa Júpiter Reads. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a live stream where there are people. Nice. There are 2 people here. Nice. Good to see you. I'm actually really really glad. As I just mentioned, I wasn't sure if anyone would show up, and I'm really glad to see that there are people here. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here. And this is a live stream where I read texts that I consider to be good, relevant, or both. In today's case, we are going through Ursula K. Guin's "The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas," which may or may not be a utopia, and this is it's actually exciting to have people here for this, because then we can actually discuss whether this is a utopian story or not. The reason why I'm coming back to it today is because I just finished rereading The Left Hand of Darkness. I posted a video about that as well, and I've had Ursula K. Le Guin a lot in my mind. And The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas was actually the very first text that I read for Vanessa Júpiter Reads back in the beginning of the pandemic, last year around April. And I wanted to visit it again. I already said that I love it, so with no further ado, unless anyone wants to voice anything in the chat, I'm really happy to see you both. Unless anyone wants to voice anything in the chat, we can start. The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas. With a clamor of bells that set the swallows soaring, the festival of summer came to the city of Omelas. Bright towered by the sea, the rigging of the boats in harbor sparkled with flags. In the streets, between houses with red roofs and painted walls, between old moss-grown gardens and under avenues of trees, past great parks and public buildings, processions moved. Some were decorous. Old people in long, stiff robes of mauve and grey, grave master workmen, quiet, merry women carrying their babies and chatting as they walked. In other streets, the music beat faster, a shimmering of gong and tambourine, and the people went dancing. The procession was a dance. Children dodged in and out, their high calls rising like the swallows crossing flights over the music and the singing. All the processions wound towards the north side of the city, where on the great ware meadow called the green fields, boys and girls, naked in the bright air, with mud-stained feet and ankles and long, lithe arms, exercised their restive horses before the race. The horses wore no gear at all, but a halter without bit. Their manes were braided with streamers of silver, gold, and green. They flared their nostrils and pranced and boasted to one another. They were vastly excited, the horse being the only animal who has adopted our ceremonies as his own. Far off to the north and west, the mountains stood up, half encircling Omelas on her bay. The air of morning was so clear that the snow still crowning the 18 peaks burned with white gold fire across the miles of sunlit air. Under the dark blue of the sky, there was just enough wind to make the banners that marked the racecourse snap and flutter now and then. In the silence of the broad green meadows, one could hear the music winding through the city streets, farther and nearer and ever approaching, a cheerful faint sweetness of the air that from time to time trembled and gathered together and broke out into the great joyous clanging of the bells. joyous. How is one to tell about joy? How describe the citizens of Omelas? They were not simple folk, you see, though they were happy. But we do not say the words of cheer much anymore. All smiles have become archaic. Given a description such as this, one tends to make certain assumptions. Given a description such as this, one tends to look next for the king. Mounted on a splendid stallion and surrounded by his noble knights, or perhaps in a golden litter borne by a great muscle slave. But there were no king. They did not use swords or keep slaves. They were not barbarians. I do not know the rules and laws of their society, but I suspect that they were singularly few. As they did without monarchy and slavery, so they also got on without the stock exchange, the advertisement, the secret police, and the bomb. Yet, I repeat that these were not simple folk. Not dulcet shepherds, noble savages, bland utopians. They were not less complex than us. The trouble is that we have a bad habit, encouraged by pedants and sophisticates, of considering happiness as something rather stupid. Only pain is intellectual, only evil interesting. This is the treason of the artist, a refusal to admit the banality of evil and the terrible boredom of pain. If you can't lick him, join him. If it hurts, repeat it. But to praise despair is to condemn delight. To embrace violence is to lose hold of everything else. We have almost lost hold. We can no longer describe a happy man, nor make any celebration of joy. How can I tell you about the people of Omelas? They were not naive and happy children, though their children were, in fact, happy. They were mature, intelligent, passionate adults whose lives were not wretched. Oh, miracle! But I wish I could describe it better. I wish I could convince you. Omelas sounds in my words like a city in a fairy tale, long ago and far away, once upon a time. Perhaps it would be best if you imagined it as your own fancy bids, assuming it will rise to the occasion, for certainly I cannot suit you all. For instance, how about technology? I think that there would be no cars or helicopters in and above the streets. This follows from the fact that the people of Omelas are happy people. Happiness is based on just a discrimination of what is necessary, what is neither necessary nor destructive, and what is destructive. In the middle category, however, that of the unnecessary but undestructive, that of comfort, luxury, exuberance, etc., they could perfectly well have central heating, subway trains, washing machines, and all kinds of marvelous devices not yet invented here. Floating light sources, fuel-less power, a cure for the common cold. Or they could have none of that. It doesn't matter. As you like it. I incline to think that people from towns up and down the coast have been coming into Omelas during the last days before the festival on very fast little trains and double-deck trams, and that the train station of Omelas is actually the handsomest building in town, though plainer than the magnificent farmer's market. But even granted trains, I fear that Omelas so far strikes some of you as goody-goody. Smiles, bells, parades, horses, blah. If so, please at an orgy. If an orgy would help, don't hesitate. Let us know, however, let us not, however, have temples from which issue beautiful nude priests and priestesses already half in ecstasy and ready to copulate with any man or woman, lover or stranger, who desires union with the deep godhead of the blood, although that was my first idea. But really, it would be better not to have temples in Omelas. At least, not manned temples. Religion, yes. Clergy, no. Surely, the beautiful nudes can just wander about, offering themselves like divine soufflés to the hunger of the needy and the rapture of the flesh. Let them join the processions. Let tambourines be struck above the copulations, and the glory of desire be proclaimed upon the gongs. And, a not unimportant point, let the offspring of these delightful rituals be beloved and looked after by all. One thing I know there is none of in Omelas is guilt. But what else should there be? I thought at first there were no drugs. But that is puritanical. For those who like it, the faint, insistent sweetness of druse may perfume the ways of the city. Druse, which first brings a great lightness and brilliance to the mind and limbs, and then after some hours a dreamy languor and wonderful visions at last of the very arcana and inmost secrets of the universe, as well as exciting the pleasure of sex beyond all belief. And it is not habit-forming. For more modest stakes, I think there ought to be beer. What else? What else belongs in the joyous city? The sense of victory, surely, the celebration of courage. But as we did without clergy, let us do without soldiers. The joy built upon successful slaughter is not the right kind of joy. It will not do. It is fearful and it is trivial. A boundless and generous contentment, a magnanimous triumph felt not against some outer enemy, but in communion with the finest and fairest in the souls of all men everywhere in the splendor of the world's summer. This is what swells the hearts of the people of Omelas, and the victory they celebrate is that of life. I really don't think many of them need to take druse. Most of the processions have reached the green fields by now. A marvelous smell of cooking goes forth from the red and blue tents of the provisioners. The faces of small children are amiably sticky. In the benign grey beard of a man, a couple of crumbs of rich pastry are entangled. The youths and girls have mounted their horses, are beginning to group around the starting line of the course. An old woman, small, fat, and laughing, is passing out flowers from a basket, and tall young men wear her flowers in their shining hair. A child of 9 or 10 sits at the edge of the crowd, alone, playing on a wooden flute. People pause to listen, and they smile, but they do not speak to him, for he never ceases playing and never sees them. His dark eyes wholly wrapped in the sweet, thin magic of the tune. He finishes and slowly lowers his hands holding the wooden flute. As if that little private silence were the signal, all at once a trumpet sounds from the pavilion, near the starting line, imperious, melancholy, piercing. The horses rear on their slender legs, and some of them neigh in answer. Sober-faced, the young riders stroke the horses' necks and soothe them, whispering, "Quiet, quiet there, my beauty, my hope." They begin to form in rank along the starting line. The crowds along the race course are like a field of grass and flowers in the wind. The festival of summer has begun. Do you believe? Do you accept? The festival, the city, the joy? No? Then, let me describe one more thing. In a basement, under one of the beautiful public buildings of Omelas, or perhaps in the cellar of one of its spacious private homes, there is a room. It has one locked door and no window. A little light seeps in dustily between cracks in the boards, second-hand from a cobwebbed window somewhere across the cellar. In one corner of the little room, a couple of mops with stiff, clotted, foul-smelling heads stand near a rusty bucket. The floor is dirt, a little damp to the touch, as cellar dirt usually is. The room is about 3 paces long and 2 wide, a mere broom closet or disused tool room. In the room, a child is sitting. It could be a boy or a girl. It looks about 6, but actually is nearly 10. It is feeble-minded, perhaps it was born defective, or perhaps it has become imbecile through fear, malnutrition, and neglect. Apologies for the ableist language. It picks its nose and occasionally fumbles vaguely with its toes or genitals, as it sits hunched in the corner farthest from the bucket and the 2 mops. It is afraid of the mops. It finds them horrible. It shuts its eyes, but it knows the mops are still standing there, and the door is locked, and nobody will come. The door is always locked, and nobody ever comes. Except that sometimes the child had no understanding of time or interval. The child has no understanding of time or interval. Sometimes the door rattles terribly and opens, and a person or several people are there. One of them may come in and kick the child to make it stand up. The others never come close, but peer in at it with frightened, disgusted eyes. The food bowl and the water jug are hastily filled, the door is locked, the eyes disappear. The people at the door never say anything. But the child, who has not always lived in the tool room and can remember sunlight and its mother's voice, sometimes speaks. I will be good, it says. Please, let me out. I will be good. They never answer. The child used to scream for help at night and cry a good deal, but now it only makes a kind of whining. And it speaks less and less often. It is so thin, there are no calves to its legs. The belly protrudes. It lives on a half bowl of cornmeal and grease a day. It is naked. Its buttocks and thighs are a mess of festered sores as it sits in its own excrement continually. They all know it's there. All the people of Omelas. Some of them have come to see it. Others are content merely to know it is there. They all know that it has to be there. Some of them understand why, and some do not. but they all understand that their happiness, the beauty of their city, the tenderness of their friendships, the health of their children, the wisdom of their scholars, the skill of their makers, even the abundance of their harvest, and the kindly weathers of their skies depends wholly on this child's abominable misery. This is usually explained to children when they are between 8 and 12, whenever they seem capable of understanding, and most of those who come to see the child are young people, though often enough an adult comes or comes back to see the child. No matter how well the matter has been explained to them, these young spectators are always shocked and sickened at the sight. They feel disgust, which they had thought themselves superior to. They feel anger, outrage, impotence, despite all the explanations. They would like to do something for the child, but there's nothing they can do. If the child were brought up into the sunlight out of that vile place, if it were cleaned and fed and comforted, that would be a good thing indeed. But if it were done in that day and hour, all the prosperity and beauty and delight of Omelas would wither and be destroyed. Those are the terms. To exchange all the goodness and grace of every life in Omelas for that single small improvement. To throw away the happiness of thousands for the chance of the happiness of one. That would be to let guilt within the walls indeed. The terms are strict and absolute. There may not even be a kind word spoken to the child. Often, the young people go home in tears or in a tearless rage. When they have seen the child and faced this terrible paradox, they may brood over it for weeks or years. But as time goes on, they begin to realize that even if the child could be released, it would not get much good of its freedom. A little vague pleasure of warmth and food, no doubt, but little more. It is too degraded and imbecile to know any real joy. It has been afraid too long ever to be free of fear. Its habits are too uncouth for it to respond to humane treatment. Indeed, after so long, it would probably be wretched without walls about it to protect it, and darkness for its eyes, and its own excrement to sit in. Their tears at the bitter injustice dry when they begin to perceive the terrible justice of reality and to accept it. Yet, it is their tears and anger, the trying of their generosity, and the acceptance of their helplessness, which are perhaps the true source of the splendor of their lives. Theirs is no vapid, irresponsible happiness. They know that they, like the child, are not free. They know compassion. It is the existence of the child and their knowledge of its existence that makes possible the nobility of their architecture, the poignancy of their music, the profundity of their science. It is because of the child that they are so gentle with children. They know that if the wretched one were not sniveling in the dark, the other one, the flute player, could make no joyful music as the young riders line up in their beauty for the race in the sunlight of the first morning of summer. Now do you believe them? Are they not more credible? But there's one more thing to tell, and this one is quite incredible. At times, one of the adolescent girls or boys who go to see the child does not go home to weep or rage. does not, in fact, go home at all. Sometimes also a man or woman much older falls silent for a day or two, and then leaves home. These people go out into the street and walk down the street alone. They keep walking and walk straight out of the city of Omelas through the beautiful gates. They keep walking across the farmlands of Omelas. Each one goes alone, youth or girl, man or woman. Night falls. The traveler must pass down village streets, between the houses with yellow lit windows, and on out into the darkness of the fields. Each alone, they go west or north towards the mountains. They go on. They leave Omelas. They walk ahead into the darkness, and they do not come back. The place they go towards is a place even less imaginable to most of us than the city of happiness. I cannot describe it at all. It is possible that it does not exist, but they seem to know where they are going. The ones who walk away from Omelas. So does anyone want to make any comments already? Like before I start talking at all? Am I out of focus? Have I lost focus on myself? It seems to be fine. I'm going to say that nope, not a utopia. Do you want to expand? I mean, I know the obvious answer, like the obvious answer of like the child suffering. Like it's, but is that like your answer is the child is suffering, therefore it cannot be considered a utopia? Or is there more to your answer to nope, not a utopia, Jojo? I'm going to start talking a little bit about like, okay. Well, hopefully you can catch up later. V, and yeah. Did I read too fast? Was it because like my reading, like was my reading a problem at any point? Is what an attempt at utopian society looks like. I see that, and actually nowadays I see that more than I used to. I'm going to say one of the first reasons why I fell in love with this story so much is just as an allegory for Europe, actually, primarily. Like a mimic that doesn't understand the core of a utopia. Ah, that's a really good point. That's a really interesting point, and I would love to read more about that, because I actually do agree that the story like that the story feels like a mimic that doesn't understand the core of a utopia. Then instead of like trying to create something from the ground up, it like they create the like that they create the good things first without caring about how it got to that place. And instead of like trying to explain how the world could be better, it instead just it just knows that utopias are not as simple as that, so like it just makes a random bad thing. And I think that's is that what you mean by like a mimic that doesn't understand the core of a utopia? Because I do find that concept quite interesting. And while you answer, I'm going to go back to like my Europe thing, where I find the story very interesting in the sense of like honestly, this has changed a lot. I used to find the story very interesting as like this idea that a lot of countries think that the only reason why they're think that like the suffering of people in other countries is a fair price to pay in order to have prosperous economies and prosperous social systems, and how that's a flawed perception of things. And obviously like that works both on a macro level and on a micro level, where like even in so-called prosperous countries, obviously there are still people who suffer because of the system, and we kind of just accept that. We're just kind of like, I mean, the people who can live within some level of prosperity within those countries, which I include myself in, the people who can live with some level of prosperity in those countries, we are kind of forced by society to just like not look at that. And that was like this allegorical meaning was the first reason why I actually really loved The Left Hand of Darkness in the first place, like years ago. Nowadays I actually find it there's one aspect of it that I find really interesting now, which is this idea that we think that suffering is mandatory for happiness to exist. Like, and we are so married to that idea that reading a story like this only makes sense if we excuse the good parts of it with suffering. And to me, this is the part where the story kind of veers into being an actual utopia, where it's kind of a call out to many of us who think that suffering is inevitable, to be like, why do you think that suffering is inevitable? Stop thinking that suffering is inevitable. Like, accept that reducing suffering and like ending suffering as much as possible is a worthy goal, and we don't need to like place any caveats to that. We don't need to make a child suffer in an empty room to have less suffering. Like, this is not how it works. It's not how it works. Like, and to me the story very much is an amazing like dare to dream story, like where it's kind of like, believe in a better future. Stop trying to create reasons why a better future could not be fully possible. And this is what the story tells to me nowadays. Does that make sense to you? Like, I just love the story so much. it's so, I love the construction of it. For them, as long as the suffering isn't theirs, then it is irrelevant. Therefore, everything is good, but really everything is a thinly veiled lie. It is. But the way that the story is constructed, like with the narrator like addressing the reader so often, and like challenging the reader so often, I love it. Like, I just really love it. I love the construction of it. And now comes the big question, the least explained thing in the entire story. Like, the one thing that I have never been able to like explain or rationalize or like put into the allegorical meaning of the story. I have never understood it. Who they are the ones who walk away from Omelas. Who are they? Like, do you have any ideas who are the ones who walk away from Omelas? Allegorically, like the to me, the obvious answer has always been that they're people who chose to end their lives. Because if we accept Omelas as an allegory for like the world, then leaving the world allegorically would be that. But at the same time, I think that answer has never satisfied me at all. Like, I have never like, and I'm not entirely sure why that answer has so why I'm so bothered by the idea of this being the answer of who they are. The narrator may be the one who walked away after realizing the truth. But what is the truth? And like, where is the narrator going? Where are the ones who walk away from Omelas going? Like, that is the question. And if we are trying to like give the story meaning and place Omelas as something that represents something in the real world, like, what is it? Is it people who like are desperate to create a new society? Are these the revolutionaries? I think that answer is probably my favorite. Is like, revolutionaries are the ones who walk away from Omelas, and it's like, in that sense, then I think that the story is really not a utopia at all. Where like, where it would imply that the only way to like create something better is to like abandon like what is known behind, like build from scratch. And like, that is utopian in a sense, but it's also really not, in the sense that like it doesn't give any idea of how to change something that is already there. It implies that the only option is to like start something from scratch, which it might be true, but it's not a truth that I want to like accept that easily. Yeah, I think the structure of the story leaves it to the reader to determine the truth. For me, I hope they see the flaw in their utopia and set off to create an improved version. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, not for sure. Like, yes, this is. I think that this is very in line with everything that I've been saying. No. with that, I don't think I have much more to say. I'm going to acknowledge that I have never had a more like hippie looking look. Um, it felt very appropriate, and I was looking at myself in the mirror before we started, and it was kind of like, this is really funny. But please voice more comments about the story in the chat if you want to, and if not, I'm going to start like tuning out. Thank you once more for the two of you for joining me, and it's as I mentioned in the beginning, I was fully ready to do this without an audience, but it's much better to have an audience. So I'm sending both of you specifically a lot of love today. And I'm going to start my little 10 seconds countdown in order to give anyone any time to comment anything before I close off. The hippie look really does fit the story. I'm okay. I'm going to just put it like this. I'm not the biggest fan of neo hippies. I have a contentious relation to neo hippies at best. So me doing a hippie look is kind of like, yeah. You didn't expect a short essay. It's not an essay. Like like as Ursula K. Guin herself said in my video, like in the video that I posted about the Left Hand of Darkness, she's not an essayist. She's a fiction writer. Her way to like understand the world is through writing fiction. So I begrudge you calling the ones who walk away from Omelas a short essay. No, but it's wonderful to have you here either way, and and always remember and never forget that you are beautiful and you are loved. Bye.